Caukin Studio is an organization that believes that everyone deserves a better quality of life through access to better designed and built spaces. From this mission, they have set a worldwide footprint of international development projects which aim to improve the lives of communities around the world through an exchange of knowledge, skills, and opportunities. The three pillars of their studio work, which are design through collaboration, learn through building, and experience through immersion, are made possible by the studios taking on many different collaborators and stakeholders in a project, all making it a holistic cycle going with the idea of democratic design, which we will talk about today. So I have Harrison here with me from Cauchin, and we will learn more about inclusivity, accessibility, and the overall idea of social development through design. So thank you so much, Harrison, for being here and for wanting to share.
Cool. Thanks for the great introduction. And yeah, happy to be here and have a great conversation.
Pleasure is mine. So take me back to how it all started and about Cauchin Studio in general.
Yeah, sure. So it started about 5 years ago. We were a group of architecture students studying architecture. Um, and we were back in sort of second year, so very young, hadn't really had a lot of experience, not much kind of knowledge or no qualifications. And it was at the time when people started to get into summer internships and working in offices and spending their time doing CAD or whatever it might be. And it didn't seem too appealing for us to spend our summers sitting in an office and not necessarily getting that much experience. So it kind of started from there, the idea of how do we gain experience whilst also, putting ourselves out of our comfort zone and experiencing new cultures and new ways of thinking and new ways of approaching architecture. So we started to contact various charities. We started with a focus around Southeast Asia, and luckily a charity called Friends of Koh Rong got back to us in Cambodia, and they were after a playground for a school that they'd recently established on a small island. And obviously, at that stage, it was our first project, so they had to put a lot of trust in us. We didn't necessarily have much to show for it or a portfolio of work. But we were proposing that we were going to fundraise to cover the cost of the materials, and we were going to design it, etc. And all they really had to do was organize logistics, give us the plot of land, the local contacts, and make sure everything went smoothly on the ground. So it was sort of a group of sort of 10 to 12 of us that went out there for 6 weeks and spent the time constructing this playground. And I think what we learned from it the most was the sort of exchange of knowledge and skills between ourselves and our architectural background and education with the local community and their knowledge of local construction techniques, the best kind of materials to use for their climate. And sort of through that process, we've learned a lot here. Is there a way in which we can maintain this kind of process and offer it to other students? And is there a way we can do this time and time again every summer, as well as obviously finishing our education and our studies? That was kind of the first project and how it came to be. And obviously since then, it's definitely changed a lot, and we've grown and developed the structure of the organization and how we work. But ultimately, the essence of it is still exactly the same.
Right.
Yeah, that's sort of the starting days.
What really intrigued us about your studio is how inclusive your approach is. I think you put a very big emphasis on democratic approach, accessibility to all, and a better quality for everyone, right? So have how have you seen the reception or the idea change over time, especially I think with the many things going on this year seems to be like the year of inclusivity.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is definitely a growing awareness and understanding, especially within the architectural community and especially in architecture students or design-based students, the need for designing that isn't just for the sort of 1% of wealthy people. And I think, you know, it's quite easy to see architecture or design as something that's a luxury or very expensive and difficult to obtain. But actually, we're trying to sort of push the idea that, you know, this there's no reason why this can't be affordable and accessible to everybody. And actually, with a kind of education that we have access to, it, you know, it doesn't make sense to funnel that knowledge and that
Right.
expertise into a tiny portion of the population. That, you know, everybody should be finding a way in which to apply it all over the world with, you know, and share it. And I think it's definitely growing. I mean, whenever we give a talk or a presentation, we do a lot of talks at universities, we always have an amazing response. Everybody's very, very positive about it. And I think students find the frustration that at university they don't necessarily get given the opportunities or the explain how you might be able to go into a career like this. And I think it is very difficult. So many people ask us, you know, how do we start? How do I start something similar? You know,
Yeah.
a lot of people want to work in this field, but don't know how or don't have that. You know, there's not really a set route either. You know, it is quite difficult to work out where you can slot in.
Yeah, with that, do you mind giving us a walkthrough of how your organization works and or like how you balance profit and impact at the same time?
Yeah, so I think it's evolved over the years. After the first year, we did a sort of a Kickstarter to fund the playground, and actually through that we also run a competition with a music artist, and that helped to sort of boost the Kickstarter and raise a little bit more money. But at that time, because we were students, we didn't need to take any salary. We didn't need to, you know, live off it at all. You know, we were just happy, just, you know, chilling around at the university. And I think because we started it so young, that was quite a fortunate blessing that we could go sort of the first 3 years without needing to use that money to pay rent or have any responsibilities in that sense. So we could do it in our spare time and make sure that everything we were doing was going towards the projects. So kind of after that first project, we knew that we couldn't run a Kickstarter again or fundraise because we'd kind of exhausted all of our friends and network, and no one was going to donate a second time round. So we offered the opportunity to other architecture students, predominantly other people at the same university we were at, and as part of their sort of participation fee, that would then go towards covering the material costs. So the next two builds were also playgrounds and very low cost. They were actually in Indonesia, one in Japanas and one in Bali. And that was sort of the next iteration and the next stage of the organization, where we didn't have to rely on fundraising. And instead, the participation cost or workshop fee would then cover the cost of the building. As the years then went a bit further, we went and started to work in Fiji, which was our first kind of upscale in complexity, in size. And they were a community hall and a kindergarten. And it's because of the sudden scale up, there was no way we could fund the entire build through workshop fees, because there was just so much more material that needed to be obtained. Fiji actually isn't that cheap to buy stuff, nowhere near as cheap as Indonesia or Asia. So that then became a combination of workshop fees as well as the partner charity. And the partner charity would fundraise through their own network and through their own sort of board of trustees, etc., to gain the remaining amount of money needed to cover the material costs. At that point, we still weren't taking any payment, or, you know, it was all just out of our own spare time, and we were covering our own expenses to get there. And then it was probably in the following year that we started to make a shift. It was when we graduated our master's course. So we no longer had a student loan, and we had to pay rent, and we had to, you know, whatever, real life started. So it was trying to work out how we could keep doing these projects in a sustainable way, whilst also maintaining a living and actually being able to do them instead of just closing down the organization. So now that we'd kind of built up this portfolio of work, we'd got the experience, the qualifications, we were able to approach slightly bigger charities, and we had a lot more, experience to show for it. And so the charities now are responsible for fundraising for the entire material cost and focusing mainly on that side of things. And then the international participant fees, so the workshop fees, is what then helps to cover our overheads of the running of the actual project and the design time, etc. So it's all about trying to make it not too expensive that students can't afford to come, but then making sure that the charities get the most out of the project and don't have to spend loads of money paying an architect, a contractor, and all of these tons of different things. They can just simply go to us, and then all of that comes under our sort of remit.
Right. No, but I'm pretty sure the participants who have to pay for it too, they feel proud once they complete the projects. They have something concrete that they created and they can see and share to the world.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think, again, another frustration that we found at university is that it's very rare to actually get on-site experience or seeing one-to-one how something goes together. You can obviously spend 5 years or 7 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And drawing over and over and over and never actually see a building complete or never actually build anything. So I think something that we're really passionate about is giving that opportunity to work on a project right from the very initial stages of the design all the way through to it's completely finished, built, and handed over to the community. And yeah, I think it definitely has helped a lot of our past students to go on and do similar work or get jobs or whatever their career path is.
Yeah, it's mutual and it's awesome. But what are the challenges of designing locally?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of challenges and limitations that come from working on these kind of projects. There's obviously sort of skill level, so we're having to make sure that what we design is buildable by the local community and by our international participants, and uses what they already know and what they already have experience with, but just doing it in an interesting way or challenging if there's a way of making it stronger and seeing how we can add value through our network of sort of engineers. So a lot of the places we work, there's difficult climatic issues, there's natural disasters, cyclones, earthquakes, etc. So it's a lot of it is about how do we use the same materials that they currently work with, but in a way in which is going to make the building stronger, last longer, and withstand strong winds in a cyclone or an earthquake. So it's really trying to make the buildings replicatable so that once we leave, the same techniques, the same methods could be used time and time again on any new buildings that we build. And there's no real point in us coming and doing a singular build, importing something from Australia or wherever with a specialized metal footing that they can never then get their hands on again. So it's all about using the local materials in an interesting way and combining sort of the local vernacular way of doing it with sort of the knowledge and expertise of environmental design specialists to come up with these kind of hybrid solutions. So that's definitely a challenge. Another challenge which is becoming increasingly difficult is how remote some of the areas we're working in are. So increasingly they seem to be getting further and further away from any kind of easy access. So last year we built a project in Fiji on Bitiki Island, which is a very, very small island in Fiji. And the only way to get there is through a small gap in the reef where a small 20-foot boat could squeeze through. So materials that came from the mainland would come on a ship, get offloaded from the ship onto the little boat, and then the little boat to the beach, and then carried from the beach to the site. And then that little boat would have to go back and forth, loading up and dismantling. And so it just basically means we need to know these kind of constraints at the very start of a project so that we're only designing things that can fit on a boat. The timber can only be so long, it can only hold so much weight. It has to be something that can be carried by a couple of people from a large boat to a small boat. There's no point specifying a massive tree log or whatever it might be, or a piece of steel which is just never going to be transported like that. So it's understanding those kind of limitations quite early on. And when you're working in places like that, the actual logistics can end up, and delivery can end up costing, nearly half as much as the materials itself. So you have to budget for all of that kind of additional expense of just getting everything to the site. And we want everything to be as local as possible. And almost everything is always sourced within the country and is accessible by the community. But even then, if it's coming from the next island, it can still be a nightmare.
There's an extent of locality.
Yeah. Because one example of that is in Vanuatu. There's no local timber mills established in the country. So even though they have an abundance of jungle and an abundance of local materials, they don't have anywhere, especially in a small village, that they can mill it, treat it, and create something that's going to last longer than their traditional homes. So it means timber has to come from further afield, and it just creates a whole host of problems. And I think the charity we're working with there, in an ideal world, they would love to set up a timber mill, for example, instead of just building a school, establishing an organization that has a sustainable and environmentally friendly source of timber could then actually have a much more of a bigger and longer knock-on effect, and provide sort of, something that's going to last longer than an untreated log that they've taken from the jungle.
Because we need to think about the maintenance after as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, big time. Yeah, making sure that anything that goes wrong, or just general wear and tear, can be easily maintained, and any materials needed for that, the locals can access easily and cheaply. So on that same project in Vanuatu, we used a lot of bamboo for all of the cladding, and it means that any damage that happens over the years, they can just replace it for free at their own time.
Right.
I'm just curious. So, besides the transfer of knowledge and skills, which are more on the technical realm, I guess, I'm pretty sure they also learn like soft skills or like an improvement in their behaviors, like maybe familial values, togetherness, or something like that.
Oh, 100%. I think it's a good question, because we often find ourselves talking about the actual build and the build process a lot, based on our architectural background. That's obviously why, but it's kind of really only 50% of a project, because on almost all of these situations, we're living within the villages, within the homes of the local community for 2 or 3 months at a time, and everything that happens off-site and away from the actual building almost becomes more valuable and more memorable than the actual construction itself. So especially any of the international students and participants that come away with us almost always say that is their favorite aspect of the whole thing, because you do get a great insight into other ways of living, other ways of thinking, and the kind of the communal values that a lot of these communities have, and how everything is shared. If you go to the farm and you get your crops for the day, you get twice as much as you need, because you're going to be sharing it with everybody else, and vice versa. And it's very much it's really great. Like, I don't know, everybody's walking in and out of everybody's homes. There's no kind of fences that you might find everywhere else in the world. There's no boundary of, oh, this is my home, that's your home. It's extremely communal, and I think it's really great to see and experience, and also just sort of the foods, the culture. There's I guess one example that was probably one of the most different kind of cultural experiences in Vanuatu. There's 2 types of village. There's a more the type of village where we built, which had they sort of accepted missionaries as they came to visit. So they're very religious, and they're kind of current cultural traditions revolve a lot around that, as well as their ancient traditions. But about sort of 30-minute walk away was another village called Bunlap, who rejected any outside influence over sort of in any history. And so they maintain all of their ancient traditions from centuries and centuries and centuries back. They disregard education, they disregard sanitation and toilets, they don't have clothes. It's really interesting to see. And so we visited on a couple of their ceremonies. They would have, when they harvested all of the yams and the taros, they would dance for like 7 or 8 hours and parade every single crop around the village before placing it on a pile. And it's super interesting and such a privilege to be able to see something like that and experience something like that. Whereas visiting these kind of countries, you might have not even any idea that that's going on, but also any access to see these kind of things. So it's really valuable to kind of get that insight and experience that.
Yeah. Well, and that's only 30 minutes away from the other one.
Yeah. Through a very dense jungle.
No, but I'm really hopeful on impact, like positive impact being a social currency though, because imagine how great of a world we will live in if all there is for us to help each other, right? So actually I'm gonna pick your brain on how far do you think we are from this, and then what barriers still exist these days that impede us from reaching this goal.
Yeah, I think we are obviously fairly far away from something like that, but there's definitely an increasing demand from like a lot of people that we speak to, and a lot of the younger generation that have these kind of aspirations. I think the shift will be when people start to realize they can, like, impact social responsibility doesn't need to be separate to profit or running a business for the traditional sense. And I think what's frustrating for us is that there's so many of these massive organizations and big companies that are their sole focus and their only intention is profit, and trying to make as much money as possible. And even if some of them have some kind of social side to them, it's very small and it's almost like a token thing that they do for public perception. And what we want to see is really organizations that have at their core, I guess their core sort of mission is the social and impact, and whatever their agenda may be, environmental impact, economic impact, is at the core of everything that they do, as well as, and they're still able to prove that they can, fund themselves and fund their employees. And I think if people are able to come up with these kind of systems, then it's a much more sustainable way than a charity would be, for example. So a lot of charities, obviously there's some that run quite differently now, but a lot of charities will rely solely on donations. And as soon as that's a very sort of unsustainable way of running, because as soon as those donations stop, you've suddenly not got any money.
Right.
And
you stop doing it.
No, and you've got no way of building your own income as a charity. It's all coming from grants or whatever it is. Whereas if you run as a social enterprise, you can eliminate that time you're spending on fundraising and put it towards whatever your mission is. So for us, design and construction. But as a company, you can figure out a way where you can still gain a profit, and then you can put that profit into your charitable mission. So sort of one example of that would be, it might seem quite backwards, but a charity could get £1,000 in donations, and then instead of spending that money on their mission, they spend it on marketing to get more donations. So then through that marketing, they would get £2,000, and then instead of spending that, they'll put it onto marketing again, and then they'll get £4,000. It sounds really backwards to not spend your money directly on the mission, but it is actually trying to think of it in a much longer term process and a much, if you kept doing that, then suddenly you'd have way more money to actually input into what you're looking to do. And that's something that companies can do, and that's the way sort of companies think. Whereas as a charity, it's very much like donation comes in, goes straight to the cause, but then it's very hard to grow if you do that. But it can be a high risk as well. You don't want to get £1,000 and then waste it. So it's understandable why that is very difficult to pursue.
Yeah, I'm also very positive on the younger generation. Well, I think us included, but I mean, like, what is it? Those Gen Z. In some ways, they are very like idealistic and hoping to make this great impact, which are very, very inspirational for me. I look up to them and I'm very inspired by their missions and all. But I think these ideals are very much needed for us to move forward, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. You have to be idealistic. I think, yeah, we're all very idealistic. Otherwise, we'd never have started this.
But maybe you can give like an advice from sharing what motivates you to do this in the first place.
Yeah, I think I would definitely just encourage anybody that does have a desire to pursue their own thing, or they have an idea for something, to actually just to go and do it. And that the best time is probably now. I think a lot of people potentially lack the confidence or think, oh, I should work in another practice for a few years first. I should gain a bit of experience first. And that is all well and good, but then so many people say that and then never actually quit and start their own thing, or never, they fall into the trap of a comfortable job, and then as they get older, they have more responsibilities, they start to get married, have kids, and suddenly the risk of starting your own thing is much greater. Whereas the younger you are, the more enthusiastic you are, the better motivation you've got. Just I would just recommend that you just do it straight away and jump into it. And you're going to make mistakes. Obviously, we've made mistakes in the past, but by just learning on the job, you're forced to learn much quicker than you ever would. Yeah, that would probably be it. And try and find like-minded people, and create a kind of network of friends or contacts that have the same ambitions or think the same as you, so that you can all work towards a common goal. Because as an individual, it can be very hard to get that motivation to work on it in your own time. And it's sometimes you just need somebody to bounce an idea back and forth with, to gain that sort of a little bit more confidence and build up those ideas. So yeah, if you know people that might have a similar aspiration, then you should just reach out, and likely is that they'll be, jump on the opportunity to work on something.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Harrison, for sharing. I think it's a really great reminder for us to start thinking of using our talent for good and for many people, but also not to forget to teach others who might benefit from those skills, right? Who knows?
I think, yeah, just I guess one final thing is about that educational side of things, and how if your ultimate goal is impact, then it's worth thinking in a lot more detail what that really means and what the knock-on effects of that is. So it's building a singular building has an impact and will create a positive change depending on what that building is, but education has the potential to create far more knock-on effects. So through the kind of skill exchange workshops and upskilling of people, of local people and of our international participants, then the idea is that in the preceding years, they then teach their network of people. The next home that they're going to build is going to be stronger and withstand the cyclone. People are also going to learn from that. And it's a continuous and knock-on effect, rather than, okay, yeah, we built one building, that's great. But really, that's just kind of a vehicle for the educational side of things, which has the potential to grow much bigger.
Yeah. All the best for Caukin Studio, and hope you can keep doing what you're doing because it's all good stuff, right? But regardless, please let us know if there's any opportunities we can help, we would certainly be interested. So, yeah, keep in touch.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for inviting us to talk.
It's our pleasure.